and I'm here with Dr. Margot Fassler. And I'm hoping that everybody sees this live video. And I see 0 people. Okay, yes, we're here. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today to this guest conversation. I'm so thrilled to welcome Dr. Fassler. She is someone I look up to in so many ways as a scholar, but especially for the fantastic breadth and joy that she brings to her work. Hello, Kristen. Hello, Susan. So we have some really interesting things that we'd love to talk about today, but importantly, we want to welcome you to this conversation. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we will try to get to as many as we can. But this conversation, Dr. Fassler, I really wanted to talk specifically to the theme, the larger theme that we're exploring this spring at EA, which is looking at the roles and participation and the experience of women in medieval music. So this is a big conversation that we're going to obviously distill into a few places, but there's some really great things that are embedded in this topic, and I'm looking forward to diving into that. But what I wanted to do first was just introduce you, and then everybody, we're going to have a listen to some plain chant to get our conversation started. So to introduce my guest here, Dr. Fassler is the director of Sacred Music at Notre Dame and the Keo Hisberg Professor of Music History and Liturgy. And she's renowned for her work in musicology and theology, that magical intersection where so many things are just so enriched by that cross-discipline. And she's a specialist in sacred music of various periods. Before coming to Notre Dame in 2009, Dr. Fassler spent a decade as the director of the Yale Institute of Sacred Music. And she's written several highly regarded books, and is so interesting to me, has also produced several film documentaries too about some really interesting topics. And I could sit here and list all of her accomplishments, but I think it's time to get into the music. Okay. So what we'll do now is have a listen to a plain chant here. And this particular piece is something that A has recorded. It's the very iconic ancient hymn, the Ave Maria Stella. Have a listen, everyone. So I'm guessing the thumbs down was the sound wasn't playing. No,
just the opening.
Okay, well, we got the opening. Let's go from there. So, Dr. Fassler, the reason I wanted to play this chant is it's something that we present often in various programs. And as modern performers, as women, as a women's ensemble presenting this music, the question I get at the end of every single performance that we do is, have women performed? Did women sing this music? Of course, they're seeing women performing the music, and it's a natural conclusion to come to, or a question to bring up. And I know this is probably has a short answer and a really long answer, but I just wanted to start the conversation here, taking something a really iconic piece of the medieval era.
Mhm.
And what was the interaction that women in general would have had with something like this?
Well, the short answer is sure. Women, female communities were in charge of their liturgy. They had their own sacristans. They copied books. They sang for the mass, and they sang the office. And this is an office hymn. Hymns in the Middle Ages are for the office. It's Carolingian. It's written in the 9th century. And when you study a hymn like this, you can see that it has many different traditions, many different melodic traditions, but that the text is pretty fixed. And it's an incredibly famous hymn, and it has in the second strophe that Eva changes to Ave. So it's this idea that Mary is the reversal of Eve, which is built, such an important theological idea, and it's built right into this hymn. So everybody in the Middle Ages knew this hymn. They may have known different melodies for it, but everybody who was a cleric or a nun or a monk knew this hymn and knew this text. It's incredibly widespread. It's in every region of Europe.
That's fantastic. So when we are speaking about plain chant, in this case, we are speaking specifically to religious communities. I'm going to ask you for any clarifications if I misspeak at any point. But it is so often, I think, when we're looking at a body of music from the medieval era, that we're talking mostly about music that would have been preserved and notated in monasteries and convents. Is that pretty fair to say?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I think when we explore the notion of women's music, are we looking then primarily at, I know we have a secular tradition, primarily in France and some other areas in the continent, but when we're talking about monastic foundations, such as convents, how could you illuminate for us how women were, and I know there's a couple of interesting pockets throughout Europe of women that were composing music, but what were some of the other roles that women played when it came to the inclusion of music in liturgical practice, such as composer or beyond just absorbing or singing?
Yeah, well, they played all the roles. And I mean, when you study medieval chant, you know that there are set forms for the mass and office that don't change very much over the course of the centuries, but the contents of them do change, and they change dramatically. And so it's in those content changes that you start to find a new composition from the Carolingian period forward. So, for example, we could take sequences, which are long chants that are sung before the reading of the singing of the gospel at Mass. Now, those things are sung from the 9th century right through to the end of the Middle Ages, and sometimes long after that. But and it's a form, it's a double versical form, but it's constantly changing. And so every time that you have a form like that, it's sort of a liturgical soft spot where composers can come and plant seeds and new plants can grow. And the sequence is one of the richest areas to study for women because women loved sequences. And it's a way in which their own voices were present in the Mass liturgy. A lot of things that we read about women take their voices away from them for any host of reasons. It's not just pure misogyny. But when you look at the history of the sequence, you can see that they were particularly beloved by women. And I think part of the reason for that is that it's a genre in flux. And it's a place where we know women did compose and did notate and did sing. In the Mass liturgy, there's a lot of literature about how, poor anorexic women hobbling around churches and not having control of the Eucharist, and so they're terribly sad and miserable. And there's a whole other side to that, which is their agency, musical agency within the Mass liturgy. The sequence being the most powerful place where that takes place in the Mass liturgy. But then they sang the entire office, and they wrote new offices for saints that were particularly meaningful to them. So there's lots of places where they're in control, A, and B, where they're writing new music and new poetry, and doing the lion's share of the singing.
I think you said a sort of hot button word there, agency, which is how women, and I think we do have a preconceived notion, perhaps I'm speaking globally here, of how women were greatly suppressed for very clear reasons.
Oh yeah, well, they are suppressed.
Right, patriarchal sort of church sort of trickle down effects of that.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk to me about what a woman, perhaps I know we're going to speak a lot about Hildegard in a little while, but thinking about other examples of agency in the composition of music for women. So could you talk a little bit more about and I love your article that you recently published about sequences and women writing sequences. So I would love for you to explain a little bit, like why were sequences so interesting? Could you speak a little bit more in detail about that?
Oh, sure. I mean, the sequence is a really important moment in the liturgy. It's right before the gospel. So it's sort of the trumpet, da-da-da, for the major part of the first half of the Mass, for that major moment. And so to write a piece for it, the gospel sets the tone for the whole day. If you ever want to study the medieval liturgy and you want to know about a particular feast, the first thing that you do is get your hands on the gospel, because everything else radiates out from that gospel reading. So to have a piece like that, right, butt up against this crucial moment in the liturgy means that, it's a great moment musically and poetically in the liturgy. It's also sung, especially in later periods of time, by the entire choir of nuns back and forth. So, you sing one half of the verse and then the other half of the choir sings the other half. So as it is a practice that brings the whole singing community together, it's a great time to write a new text that talks about your religiosity. What are your ideals as a religious community? And that's what they do. I mean, you can study the sequences and really get a great handle on what people thought about who they were and their particular identity. And then you proclaim it, right in the choir together. I mean, Hildegard wrote, 8 sequences, 7 or 8, depending on how you count. Because one of them is called a hymn, but I think it's really a sequence. Anyway, she that's her only and that's her only Mass music. She's got an Alleluia, and a Kyrie, but that's her Mass music sequences. Now that tells you something.
That's so interesting.
It's a form in which she can compose. And she can make a statement to her community in that music about their identity.
The very first piece I ever heard of Hildegard's was the O Virga ac Diadema. Mm-hmm. It's very ecstatically beautiful sequence devoted to the Virgin, and it changed my life hearing that piece.
Yeah, it's a great piece. Susan's asking where that article is. It's in Speculum.
Susan, I will place it in Speculum. I will place links to that in the notes for this video for everybody. Anything that comes up, it's really wonderful.
And the other thing about sequences is they're double versical form, so it's A A B B C C. So you get new text but repeat of the music. So that means that each half strophe is in an intertextual relationship with the other half. Mm-hmm. So that gives you these cool moments where you can interrelate things, say it one way, say it another way, all different things that you can play. And the sequence is the most joyful piece. Groqueo says that the most joyful piece in the entire liturgy. because it's a trope of an alleluia. So that's another reason why they're so beloved, because they're expressions of rhapsodic joy, you know. So that's a good thing about them too.
In your experience and in your time exploring these pieces and listening to them or even singing them yourself, do you observe or impart any special, and this is highly subjective, this question, but do you observe any special character to music that was written by women? Say a sequence, and let's set Hildegard aside for the time being, because we do know that she has a very singular way about composing music. Is there anything that you find exceptional or rare or different in the way you listen to the music that was, say, outside of maybe standard liturgical practice that would have been included in a women's convent?
Yeah, I think that's so. I mean, you can't, lots of times you can't tell who composed something or who wrote something, and scribes are not gendered in the Middle Ages. So the most important thing that you can do if you're a scholar who works in early music is to really plunge into, as much as you can, the life of a particular community. And it's at that moment then that you can find answers to the kinds of questions that you're asking. And there's been some wonderful work done on this, Anne Yardley has written a lot on women in England and their musical practices. And her writings are very much something that I very much recommend. And then there's a new book by Katie Bugish, Bugyis, published by Oxford, which is called, I think it's called The Care of Nuns. And her basic point, and she's working in England, her basic point is that women had care for themselves in ways that we often don't give them credit for. But she teases that out by careful work with manuscripts and with particular communities. And so I think one of the things that women really were interested in is the rising up of cults of female saints. And I think there you can find their particular voices, because they're able to feel close to and explore who they are. I mean, you could think about Eloise, and her relationship with Abelard and their interest in Mary Magdalene, for example. Well, why might they be interested in her? Well, she was thought to be a fallen woman who was redeemed and became a saint. So, there's a lot of speculation about that, for example. But I think looking to the cults of female saints is especially interesting to find women's voices and the way that they write about who they are and what they care about.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought of that at all. I wonder, sort of hearkening back to what we had just talked about with regards to women taking the agency to compose and to find ways within the liturgy for opportunities to add their voice.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think that there was a relationship between women having that agency and social status, or the kinds of women that were entering convents? Because we have some very sort of clear examples of women that were, say, entering a royal house like Las Vegas, or the women at the Rupertsberg of Hildegard's foundation. Was there any correlation between women that were writing and feeling that because of their social status or relative wealth or means that they were more entitled as it were, to create and to elaborate upon the liturgy or the mass?
Well, I think no more than men. I mean, the educated classes essentially are the upper classes.
Hmm.
And I mean, there are certainly exceptions, people who are left in baskets and are trained up to have fine educations. But, the basic occupation of the Middle Ages is farmer and farmer's wife. And, it's very hard work. And there wasn't a lot of time left over for getting a fine education. So basically, what survives for us and what remains for us is the work of the upper classes. And, that's the case for a very long time in many cultures, not just the cultures of the Latin Middle Ages. And, this idea of giving a great education to all is not always something that people believe in, and that they have the means to bring about. And it's too bad to think of, there wasn't a meritocracy to speak of in the Middle Ages, and to think of all the wonderful minds and spirits, that went unsung and unknown, and always have. I mean, it's a sadness always to think of it. In many cultures, American culture too. Good heavens, a lot of broken hearts.
I feel sometimes this, looking at anonymous manuscripts, anonymous works, that there's a kinship that I feel with the creators of old music. That there's someone seeing this, someone's here, someone's revitalizing and breathing life into this beautiful thing that you created.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
700-800 years ago. Yeah, it feels like a really great, a beautiful privilege is how I see this vocation.
Yeah, I agree. I think the most exciting thing for me as a scholar, who was trained as a singer but doesn't sing in public, etc. But when I work with manuscripts, that's my primary work now, and I have that feeling all the time of closeness to the maker, to the materiality. And I think when you sing, it's the same way. You're taking the notes off the page and entering into anew something that someone else sang and wrote down for you to sing, and it's a wonderful meeting of past and present, and I like it so much. I've worked. My book now is on this one manuscript of Hildegard, the illuminated Scivias, the one with the pictures.
Yeah,
and it doesn't survive as far as we know, but I've spent years studying the photographs of it. And I feel so close, even though I can't touch it, to it and to the people who made it. And I can't say how much I love that. When I know a scribe's hand and I say, oh, here she comes again, or she corrected that. Why did she correct that? What did it mean that she corrected that? I'm there in the scriptorium. I'm a part of their lives,
Indeed.
And it's a wonderful feeling.
I sense, when we look to the page and we bring, the symbols and this sort of symbolic language of the notation, and we actually breathe life into that, and it becomes this sort of almost 5-dimensional experience of really being one with that sound world. And yes, all of that beauty and inspiration that's embedded in on the page.
And it's a recreation of time, because music is time. So it's the only way really that you can recreate history in such an elemental way is through music. You remake their time.
So cool. Yeah. I have, So many questions, but what I think would be really wonderful is to actually hear Crossley says, I love that. Crossley's another member of our ensemble. One thing I think you started speaking to the illuminated Scivias, and I know that you've spent, as you said, so much time living and breathing, maybe sticking it under your pillow, like having a relationship that you've built over the course of your career with this work. I would love to speak a little bit more about Hildegard and her legacy and her worldview. It's something that really catapulted me, as I mentioned, hearing that O Virga ac Diadema, hearing that for the first time, just right into the world of medieval music. That was it. I was sunk. And I'd love to hear more, and I know our audience would love to hear you speak more about the visionary works that are in that. Let me be more specific. I would love to hear more about the songs, the so-called Scivia songs, but I would also, I hope our audience would love to hear about this too. Love to hear about your work about modeling the cosmos that Hildegard brings to life through her visions. And I would invite everyone that's following along to drop your questions in here. I'm happy to ask Dr. Fassler any of your questions, and we'll of course have time at the end. So could we start maybe, I'm going to sort of plant the seed. You talk you have a wonderful, wonderful chapter in Barbara Newman's book, Voice of the Living Light, about Hildegard as composer and dramatist. So speaking about, I see that particular chapter as looking at the Scivia songs and the Ordo Virtutum as the two sort of bodies of work that are associated with the Scivias directly. Could you speak a little bit more about what you define as sonic icons in that work, which I love? And so knowing, this again, like this could be a short answer or a really long answer, whatever you would like to speak to, can you talk to us a little bit about the Scivia songs?
Sure. Hildegard is an example of an artist-composer. So I think without a doubt that she designed those paintings. I don't think she painted them, but I think that she designed them. And from long study of the manuscript, she tells us it took 10 years to write Scivias. I've looked at all the different stages of preparation in that manuscript, and it was always her intention to have it be illuminated. I think it took about another 10 years to copy it with all of the materials that are in it. And so I also think without a doubt that Scivias and the Ordo Virtutum are hand in glove, and that she wrote the play to be sung by her community and the theology to provide the context for the drama. So they work together, and the songs as well too. I've written this article quite some time ago, and it forms now a chapter in my book about the importance of the Feast of All Saints to Hildegard. And she was consecrated on the day of All Saints. She became a nun on that day. And so what happens on All Saints, we have a manuscript from that region, Engelberg 103, and we can see what the chants were on that day. And of course, they go through the categories of the saints, saint by saint. And so do the Scivias songs. So the Scivias songs are in a sense Hildegard's own very creative reworking of her understanding of sanctity and of her hope for herself and the members of her community to join in that sanctity. So the most important theological idea to Hildegard is the incarnation. She's not particularly a student of the cross. although it matters to her, of course, as a Christian theologian. But she puts her emphasis on the moment of the incarnation and redemption that begins at that time. So she's very, very interested in the Virgin Mary for that reason. And her musical hermeneutic, which I laid out in a couple of articles. One is in Jams in the Journal of the American Musicological Society. It's about allegorical architecture in Scivias, and it puts the play back into Scivias. And the other is called Angels and Ideas, which was published in a German collection about 6 years ago. So, to make a long story short, that's what people say that you shouldn't say because that means you're going to go on for a long time. You have two falls, right? The first fall is the fall of Satan on the first day of Genesis. Okay? And that happens at the same time that the angels are created. So you get light and darkness on the first day of Genesis, according to Hildegard and according to many Christian theologians. So you have good and evil right there from the start, and they're in contrast with each other. What happens to Satan when he falls? You tell me, Allison. Are you there? Or are you with your cat? Maybe Allison had to go away and take her cat off. What happens when Satan falls to Satan? Do you know?
When who falls to Satan?
When Satan, who was an angel, falls.
Yes.
What happens to him?
He
loses his voice. He can no longer sing.
Amazing.
And that is why he speaks in the Ordo Virtutum, because he's a fallen angel. So the important idea in that play and in the Scivias chants is that human beings are meant to regain the place that he and his minions lost in paradise as singing angels. So they are meant to have these extraordinary voices, you see. And that's why she writes about Adam the way she does, before and after the fall. Before the fall, he can do anything with his voice. He's just a brilliant singer, you know. So everything is set, right? We're all good. We're all going to make these new angels with bodies, you know, and we're all going to go up there and have a good time and sing with God. But we fall. And when we fall, we lose our voices too. And so one by one, we have to regain those voices. It's a musical hermeneutic, or hermeneutic of salvation. And so she believes that there will be the same number of people who learn to praise God and recover their voices of praise as there were angels that fall. And that's the golden number. And that's the number that she references at the end of the play, Ordo Virtutum. That's why it's there. And the Scivias songs are the songs of praise that are sung in the ranks of heaven by those who have recovered their voices. And they're songs that human beings sing in praise of them. So that's why they always say, oh, angels, or, oh, Mary. Because you're looking up and going, wow, oh. And there are not songs in general for Christ. And that's because Christ is the music. So the songs that are made in praise of God are the creative essence of the second person of the Trinity, with humans joining in it. and recreating it. And those songs are emblematic of that. They represent to the community who remakes them the potential that they have to join. So it's kind of complicated, but that's how it is very simply laid out. And I have a lot about this in my book, my new book, which will be published by the University of Pennsylvania Press. And it's called Creation and Cosmos in Hildegard's Illuminated Scivias. And it's about the treatise, and it's about the play, and it's about theology. And the first chapter of the book is just an overview of science and music, right up to the time of Hildegard, and then talks about what she may and may not have known, because she never tells us what she knows, because she can't. They're prophetic words. So she can't go around quoting Augustine and Gregory. She doesn't. So if you look at the edition of Scivias, you'll see that it's all resonances, because she doesn't quote directly. So you have a merry time trying to figure out quotations in her music from the chant, and a merry time trying to figure out quotations in her theology from all of the thinkers that we know she read. She was a great scholar, one of the greatest scholars of the 12th century. How she had all the stuff that she had is beyond me. Her brother was the cantor of Mainz, so he was in charge of the library there. He probably supplied books for her. She went on preaching tours. But she was absolutely rabid for knowledge. Always. And the things that she does, the way that she works many different layers, music, art, theology, drama, she's the only one in the Western canon who does that. Only one.
You can see how it takes layers of our own experience to be able to delve into all of that texture.
Yeah. We have to join her community. We have to write with them. I just wrote an article there's a new Cambridge companion for Hildegard of Bingen, which is coming out next year. And it's edited by Jennifer Bain and has a wonderful article by Allison Allstadt. Oh, the phone is ringing. I'm sorry. I can't turn it off. There's a wonderful article by Allison Allstadt on the Order Virtutum, and many other wonderful articles. And I wrote an article for it called Hildegard and Her Scribes, where I go into the scriptorium and look at how many hands there are. And I think all of those women copied manuscripts, or many of them did. So, they don't only read her work and sing her work, but they copy her work.
Do you think that her works were copied outside of the Rupertsberg?
Oh, sure. We know they were.
Yeah.
There are manuscripts from the 12th century. But there's one in the Heidelberg Library right now that's a very late 12th century manuscript of Scivias, and it's illuminated too.
Indeed.
But not in the style of Hildegard. And then there are copies of her letters elsewhere. But the Rupertsberg is the main scriptorium in the 12th century of her works. And had they not done the work that they did, we would not have them. And had they not written her music online,
Mm-hmm.
C line, F line, all carefully laid out, we wouldn't have the music either. And there's only one copy of the play that survives from the 12th century. And that's what's in the Reason Codex.
Right.
Yeah. So it's so precious, Jennifer Bain wrote this great article about how the Reason Codex was oh my gosh, that's a wonderful article. How the Reason Codex was preserved by this woman, this librarian.
Yes.
Put her life on the line, to preserve it.
You
guys, you have to read that article.
Was this in Wiesbaden or
yeah, it was in Wiesbaden.
Something like that. There was
the one that's lost now is Wiesbaden 1, and the Reason Codex is Wiesbaden 2.
Okay.
Those are the numbers of them. So Wiesbaden 1 n'existe plus, we think, but Jennifer Bain thinks it may be in an attic in Russia somewhere.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, there's like endless miracles with Hildegard's stuff.
It's so true.
That we have it at all is just, one false move and we would have died,
I think I see, all of the synchronistic events that you witnessed throughout her own life, not to mention all the intervening years from 1179 until now that we are talking about her right now, and of course have these incredibly preserved manuscripts. It's truly a miracle.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about the modeling. This is very mysterious to me. I'm so curious to know, how this, first of all, how this evolved out of this, what you're talking to us now about the.
Yeah.
Yes.
It
Do tell.
it started when I came to Notre Dame in I just came on January 1, 2010. And so they took the new faculty around and showed them the facilities. And one of the places they took us to, my husband said, be sure you go on that trip. And so I went to the planetarium, which is a state-of-the-art planetarium. And there I saw what you could do with Hildegard. And I stood up, they said, well, do you have any questions? I said, you don't understand what this does to me. I said, you just don't understand. This has to happen. So now where are we? 2022, 12 years later, since that horrible moment of, it's like I say, oh God, please don't put this idea in my head. Please, please, please. Because once it comes, then you say, well, I'm not going to, that I can't do that. And then pretty soon you're trying to get grant money for it. So it's very expensive and it's a crazy thing, but we are recreating her model of the cosmos from the Cosmic Egg using all of her ideas and her artworks so that we can show what the cosmos was like for a Christian theologian in the first half of the 12th century. They say, well, you shouldn't do science and theology together. Oh, those two don't have anything in common. Well, I'm sorry. There are times in human history when they did. Today it seems totally nuts to us, but, she has an end of time. She has a Big Bang. We create the Big Bang based on what she says. And she talks about the whole thing in motion. She talks about it. She thinks filmically. She thinks, I've studied those pictures. You don't want to know how long. And they all interlap like that. They're glass onions. You can look down through them all and see them squiggling and wiggling. And she thinks filmically. They move. And she tells us how they move. The whole inspiration comes from her. It is her fault, not mine, because she had the idea that these things would come to life. And I just come along and go, oh God, I guess I got to do this. So I will say that it's been extraordinary. And that moment when you feel that you're in her scriptorium and you're in your studio making film, and there's translatio studii, there's this dynamic relationship between her scriptorium and the painters who came there to make those paintings, because those nuns weren't painters as far as we know, and our studio, and that we're sort of in cahoots, as it were. It's a partnership, It's been amazing. And we're almost done.
Congratulations.
Oh, we're almost done. And when we finish, I'm taking the whole thing to Kalamazoo because they have a planetarium there. So I'll take it there, when the swallows come back to Capistrano, as it were, when the medievalists, when the COVID is over, please let it be over, and we're able to all meet there. I'll show the thing, and I'd like to do a panel on the cosmos in the 12th century, get Andrew Hicks and some of the other people who work on cosmology, and show it. But we have surround sound in our planetarium. We have, I think, 24 speakers, and my students have done the music. I've transcribed it, and they've done the singing. So
is this something that could be taken on the road, not just to say where you would need to be present? Is it something that could be on tour?
Well, there's two things. We've taken it on the road quite a bit, the first act of it. And people who have planetaria, we've gone there, we've done it. But we have this idea next year, Chris and I, Chris Jara, he's the digital artist I work with, that we'd like to make a flat model if we could of the thing. I mean, it won't be the same. There's nothing like the domification of those images. And then we bring the paintings out. I did it in London. And London has the most amazing planetarium, the Harrison Planetarium. Oh my God, it's so amazing. I mean, to see the nuns have loaned me the images, the high resolution images, which they own. And so I have them. Otherwise I couldn't do this work. I mean, it would all pixelate out and be stupid. But because they gave me the most extraordinary images, I've been able to make it, And then we bring the paintings on and we show how a painting comes to life. So we put the paintings up and then we bring them as best we can. Oh, it's been wild, I'll tell you. It's
so beautiful to see you light up as you talk about this.
I can't believe I still care about it. I mean, by rights, I should want to stuff that thing in the garden.
Burned out. Yeah.
I should be burned out. This started in 1995. I was at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, working on my Chartres book, nice and happy, just going along with my little life as a medieval musicologist. And Barbara Newman shows up to the tea.
Wow.
And she says, now, I'm writing a book about Hildegard that has to come out in 1998 for the 9th centennial. She said, and you are going to write the article on the music. And I said, well, I am not, because I do not work on Hildegard. And she said, well, you do now. True story. She laughs about it to this day.
I love that.
She rubs the salt in my poor little wounds because I've worked so hard. Oh God, I hope it was a little bit worth it.
Well, I would say, I think easily that everybody who would be listening to this wants to say thank you. We appreciate that more than you could possibly say, more than you could possibly know. So can I just add just a little personal addition here? So a year later, 96 was the first time I had heard that chant that I mentioned before. And I happened at the time to be studying astronomy.
Oh.
I was running my own planetarium shows.
Really?
Yes. I was.
Hey, can you get us into Jersey? They got a new planetarium, coming up.
Well, I always envisioned actually performing at the Hayden Planetarium.
Oh, yeah. We'd love to get in there.
Of course. And I think you may have a champion in Neil deGrasse Tyson who is, through watching the Cosmos series, if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. And I love the fact that it is also exploring so many different facets of cosmology, but including historical figures and their conceptions of the universe and the cosmos. So I'm just saying it might be a tree worth barking up, because how fantastic would that be? So I may be getting a little off topic.
As soon as I finish the thing, hopefully in July, I'll bark. I mean, I'm so busy, I don't have time to promote anything.
Oh, that's just,
I mean, and they say, well, if you do, they say, oh, well, anything that you do, you got to spend half your time with promotion. And I say, I don't.
It's so hard. I understand completely.
I don't have a press agent, I mean, I don't. And as a performer, you must do an awful lot of work with your promotion of your group.
Yes, it's a huge part.
You promote.
Yes, I do.
Those of us who are poor little scholars, we're just, down in the trenches. We're not business people.
Dr. Fassler, there's a comment here from Dr. Weiss at Peabody who says, it was worth it when you came to Peabody. And
that's Susan. Susan, that was so much fun. I have to tell a funny story about it. I said to the students, I said, one of the most interesting things about the Order Virtutum is, how did Hildegard assign the parts? Did she assign the virtues according to you were good at the virtue or you needed the virtue? And so I said, for example, and there was this blonde woman sitting in the front row, you know, with a red skirt on up there or whatever. And I said, for example, what part were you assigned? And she was chewing gum and she said, chastity. Oh, it was like we had it prearranged it. It was so funny. That was so great.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
It was so hilarious. I don't know if Susan remembers it or not. I've been laughing about that ever since it happened. That was a long time ago.
That's great. Can I just ask, not exactly a personal question, but I would love to know, I mean, when you first, you talk about your background as a singer too, when did you first encounter Hildegard's music? And can you recall that experience for us?
I can't remember. I was teaching music history, you know. I graduated from Cornell in 19, Don Randall was my doctor father. And we're still very close friends. And I graduated in 1983 and got a job right away teaching music history. Back then there were jobs. and so I knew about it, and Claude Polisco was rewriting the Grout book, and I made him put Hildegard in there. So that's how it started to be in that book. So that was way back when I was a pup, you know. But you know, there's so much craziness with Hildegard and insanity, and you know, rocks and oh my God, you name this. I just you know I shied away because you know I didn't want that brand, that new agey nuttiness to be a part of my life, really. So that's why I said I don't work on Hildegard.
Right.
Because it was hard back in the 90s to take her seriously because there was so much nuttiness. So much nuttiness, you know, going on. I mean, as Barbara Newman says, you know, she's treated like the dancing bear of the Middle Ages. And, you know, she wasn't. She was a very serious scholar and a brilliant composer, poet, artist. And this idea that she's this nutcase, you know, is not good. It's not good.
Well, it is interesting to see, you know, as we're having this conversation now, the trajectory of studies and interest in Hildegard. And I sometimes do look at, you know, how her music has been adapted, her texts. I look on iTunes all the time and see what's happening. And I think, you know, there's so many threads that she weaves together that for so many of us, we'll take one thread that resonates with us and then, you know, it goes somewhere.
But you know why it's so great? It's so great because it's so rhetorically profound. It's so smart the way she makes phrases and words. As a singer, you know this. And so it's, you know, it's very carefully crafted, but yet it's very simple. If you take it apart, it's quite simple, and you can see how you could teach it to a community, you know, without huge amounts of difficulty. So it's made for community. I mean, I've been studying the voices of her community through her music and figuring out, you know, probably what kinds of singers she had, and that's been a lot of fun. I got some stuff about that in my book.
That I can't wait to.
I can't wait till that book is done. Believe me.
We would make.
Oh my God, it's been terrible. Right? And you know, when I first tried to write that book, it was terrible. I wrote it and I hated it because I was trying just to put my articles in it, you know. I said, oh, I got all the articles, 14 articles. I'll just boil them down, stick them in the book, you know, and I'll be done. Well, it was awful.
Oh.
So it was only fun when I went beyond the articles.
Awesome.
And started learning lots of new things that I got really excited about the book. And now I'm very excited about the book. I think it's probably the best thing I've done in my life, this book.
Congratulations.
I mean, maybe tomorrow I'll hate it, but
Oh my
But
goodness.
I had a good week, I had a good week.
That's great. It's still going strong today. So it's
you go up, if you're a scholar, you go up and down all the time because you write something, you think, oh my God, this is so stupid. I can't believe it. I should slit my throat. And then the next day you have a new insight and you start all over again and you say, wow.
It's like a work. It's an organism. It grows and breathes.
It's like having bipolar disorder or something,
Or it's just good days and bad days.
Yeah, we all do, right? We're all mildly bipolar.
I would love to reach out to our audience.
Oh, of course.
We have a few minutes left, and if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I know I have so many wonderful thoughts, and I can't wait to see the book woven into a new tapestry from disparate parts. But that will be really thrilling, and really we are all so inspired by. I know I'm inspired by your capacity to look at that glass onion, but not just the illuminations. I'm speaking more metaphorically about the whole process of diving into the medieval world and all of the works that we have come to explore and love and are so catalyzed to learn more about.
Ken Levy always used to say, you got to rein in your impetuosities. Musicology is slow stuff.
I can see that.
We were quoting that just yesterday, because I'm how many years in? I don't know. I don't even want to count them anymore.
Yeah.
Well, does anybody have any questions you
want
to ask?
To know if there's any questions.
Can they just blurt out?
They can't blurt, but they can write. Blurt, write.
Kind of a special kind of rhyme, blurt and write.
Well, Dr. Fassler, when is this new work, Creation and Cosmos? When do you have a time frame for the publication?
The book? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm trying to get it in its very final form now. I got one more chapter to revise. So let's say it goes off in March. And then in about a year, it comes out. That's the hope. But you got to rein in your impetuosities.
I think that's one of the best things about being inspired. We have to keep the spark alive. Yeah. Well, let me then put the bookmark in this place and say thank you for
thanks for having me.
And our audience, I can tell they had a lot of fun, just like we did.
I had fun with them too. It was great I couldn't really see their dear faces, and I see some people that I really care a lot about here. But I can see their faces in my head.
Oh God. And it's been a real joy to have you join in our festivities for this celebration of women in medieval music here in Maryland and Washington, D.C. And I want to take a moment to invite our audience to continue this journey with us. Next week, I am hosting a webinar on some of the repertoire that we're speaking of related to women composers of the medieval era, and some things that I think are really special and really exciting to learn about. So that's happening next week, and you can, if you have a unicorn pass, you're going to receive a link to that. But if you're interested, go to our website, ayaensemble.com, to learn more. And of course, join our mailing list, because we have events every Tuesday through April 16th.
I have to join.
Yes, we have our final culminating performance on April 16th, and you're all very welcome to see that too. I can't wait. Thank you, Dr. Fassler. Thank you so much, everybody. There's lots of thank yous from our audience. Yes.
Hail and farewell.
Exclamation points too. That's excellent.
Ave et salve.
Thank you, everybody.